And now, Mr. President, I want to talk about climate change. It's one of the most serious threats facing our nation. And, you know, all you really have to do is look out the window to see it's already happening. And I want to talk about a great thing that just happened recently, when USA Today, which is the nation's largest newspaper in print form, more people read that paper than anybody else, they announced in a front-page story last Friday on March 1st that they are going to spend a year looking at the issue of climate change. This is a front page. They show the temperatures going up. They talk about more asthma. But let's look at what they said. Because, Mr. President, I am appalled that with all of this going on around us, we just seem to have no way forward on this issue. And I'm going to be here every Monday after votes to talk about this. And I urge every member of the Senate, Democratic or Republican, who cares about this issue to join me. We have got to wake up the American people to the fact that this Senate is doing nothing, even though I believe there's a majority for doing something. We don't have the 60 votes. So let's talk about it. This is what USA Today says: why you should sweat climate change. More American children are getting asthma and allergies. More seniors are suffering heat strokes already, Mr. President. Food and utility prices are rising. Flooding is overrunning bridges, swamping subways, closing airport runways. We know this is true. People are losing jobs in drought-related factory closings. Cataclysmic storms are wiping out sprawling neighborhoods. Towns are sinking. Towns are sinking. And Congress does nothing, does nothing. USA Today, this isn't a science fiction end of the world scenario. These scenes are already playing out somewhere in the United States. They're expected to get worse in the years ahead. People need to act quickly. Climate change is not a place and time distant. It is here and now. That's a quote from Kim Naughton, who is a health professor at Columbia University. And this was shown in USA Today. The most recent decade was the nation's hottest on record. This isn't a guess. This is the truth. The most recent decade was the nation's hottest on record, and 2012 was the hottest single year. The average U.S. temperature has risen 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit since reliable record-keeping began in 1895. 80% of that has occurred since 1980. I think I will use that other chart, but I wasn't going to. The economic costs of all these changes are enormous, not only for those directly affected, but for the nation's taxpayers who are stuck with the bills for disaster relief, national flood insurance, and drought-related crop losses. Now, what are we supposed to do about this? Clearly, scientists tell us there's too much carbon pollution in the air, and I'll show you where it's coming from. The electricity sector gives us 34% of the carbon. Transportation sector, 27% of the carbon comes from there. The industrial sector, 20%. The ag sector, 7%. Residential and commercial buildings, 11%. Now, we know that President Obama has done an amazing job in leading us with members here in the Senate. I have to say, bipartisan, Senators Snowe and Feinstein worked so hard on this. He said, it is time for us to get better fuel economy. Fuel efficiency is going to take carbon out of the air. And we are moving toward 55 miles per gallon. That is excellent, and we can continue to make great progress as we move toward plug-in hybrids. I drive one of those myself, and eventually electric cars. So I could tell you, when you drive these cars, You don't visit those gas stations. It saves you money. It's a win-win. The environment gets cleaned up, you save money, it's all good. And we know the electricity sector is complicated, but what we want to do, many of us here, is to say if you put a price on carbon, it will move us away from the dirtiest types of electricity production toward clean electricity. And that's what we're trying to do. So Senator Sanders wrote a very strong bill that I'm a co-sponsor of. It would put a price on carbon, and we would take the funds that we get from that price on carbon. It's, I think, $20 a ton. When you start, it will bring in many billions, and what we'll do with it is 60% of it will go to the people to soften the blow of higher electricity prices until we've moved to clean energy. So we have to move on this. On residential commercial buildings, I have a bill to move forward through the GSA, the biggest government landlord. It's the biggest landlord in the country, and we can move forward with economies to those buildings by making sure that there are that the windows don't let in all that air or escape all that heat, and we can make those weather-related improvements, and we can encourage them to move to solar and other ways. So the industrial sector, the same. Once there's a price on carbon, they will move toward putting in solar and the rest. So in closing, I just have to say this. We've got one self-inflicted wound called a sequester, and we can get out of it really easily by working together on deficit reduction in a balanced way and stop these mindless cuts that hurt the people of our nation, the children of our nation, the seniors of our nation, law enforcement of our nation, our busiest airports, trains, and the rest. We can avoid all that if we're smart and we say we want a balanced approach. And I believe that if we recognize what USA is saying, which is you should sweat climate change because it's happening now, if we can come together, we can move forward and do our part. Because we just heard the Environment and Public Works Committee, I'm proud to share it, we heard from 4 scientists. And when they were asked, if we do nothing, what will happen? They said parts of our nation will not exist anymore. Mr. President, imagine hearing people say, no more Atlantic City, no more New Orleans. In Florida, you wouldn't recognize it. That's the first answer. We didn't even get to what happens in the West. And we know from senators like Tom Udall what would happen to that beautiful state of New Mexico would become a desert environment, no more green, and the fires that are already starting. Mr. President, I am sad to say that we've done little to nothing. I can only say that this president has done whatever he could do. And so any progress we've had have come from his executive orders and, I might add, the states. My home state of California, just moving forward, creating jobs in clean energy, moving forward, being a model, and I'm going to support them. Our Governor, Jerry Brown, he gets this. It doesn't take a degree in climatology to see what is happening to our climate. And it's happening, we understand it. I saw a movie, it was called Chasing Ice. Oh God, if you haven't seen it, I suggest you watch it. This is a great photographer who goes to 4 different places, including Montana, Greenland, Iceland, Alaska, and he puts these cameras up there to watch the glaciers. And you see what happens over 2 years. These glaciers are disappearing. This isn't some kind of a cry for attention on my part. I just love my grandkids, and I want them to have a planet that is habitable for them. They deserve that. And they're going to look back to this time someday and say, my goodness, what were they thinking? But it's not too late for us. And with USA Today leading the way, I think we can turn public opinion around and get going on this issue. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I yield the floor.